Hello, everyone, and welcome to the How Do I Knit That podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Dawn of Sarah Dawn's Designs, and this 19th episode of the How Do I Knit That podcast is all about sweater construction. That is, how sweaters actually go together, what are the different types of sweaters, and why that's actually important. So, broadly, what is this podcast all about? Well, this podcast came about because I hear so many people saying, oh, I could never knit that, or I could never make that. And I think that's really sad. I'm a firm believer in the idea that anyone can knit or crochet or quilt or whatever your chosen art is. All it takes is some knowledge, the right tools, the right techniques, and the willingness to get a little ingenious. If you're looking for the previous podcast episodes, you can find them on my Patreon, which I will link to in the description, or in a YouTube playlist, which I will also link to in the description. Let's start with what should hopefully be a simple determination. What exactly is a sweater? Well, for the purposes of this podcast episode, I'm defining a sweater as a knit or crochet garment for the upper body that has a front, back, two sleeves, and either pulls on over the head or is fastened by buttons or zipper up the front. Now yes, this also covers things like coats, jackets, and tunics, but for what we're talking about today, the same ideas apply, so that's not a problem at all. There are two major ways to make a sweater, working from the bottom hem to the top and working from the neckline or back neck and down. There's also a construction method called sleeve to sleeve, where you knit from one sleeve across the body and then knit the other sleeve, but that's less common, so I'm not going to be talking about that as much. It does absolutely exist though, and I didn't want anyone thinking that there are only two methods of knitting sweaters. There are lots. These are just the two most common ones, and the ones which most sweaters you'll find in books and magazines fall into. Now, let's combine that with neckline and shoulder construction. The common methods for the neckline and shoulder construction of a sweater are, in no particular order, drop shoulder, modified drop shoulder, set-in sleeve, raglan sleeves, and a circular yoke. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list, but most of the sweaters you're probably going to see use one of these construction types. Put them together with top-down or bottom-up sweaters, and you're going to see lots and lots of variation. Which one is the best? That's an unfair question. Each style of design has its own advantages and disadvantages. Let's go through them one by one, shall we? Let's start with the easiest form of sweater construction, the drop shoulder sweater. At its simplest, the drop shoulder sweater is a rectangle with the hole cut out for the head. There's no sleeve shaping for the body whatsoever. Some drop shoulder sweaters even eliminate any neckline shaping as well and simply seam the shoulder and side seams of two rectangles. There's no shaping for the sleeves either. Given that most drop shoulder sweaters have a longer underarm drop than other designs, that is, they have a longer measurement between the top of the shoulder seam to the underarm of the sweater, the sleeves do tend to decrease stitches as you work towards the wrist, so the wearer isn't drowning in over large sleeves, but again, you will see some sweater designs with larger sleeves as well. You can knit a drop shoulder sweater from the bottom up or top down. Traditionally, they're knit bottom up in multiple parts, front, back, two sleeves, and seamed, but my preferred style is to knit them into round until the underarms, then split for the underarms, then pick up and knit the sleeves in the round. Pick up stitches for a neckline, and you're good to go. This is almost entirely because of personal preference. I much prefer picking up stitches over seaming and mattress stitch. Though you can knit drop shoulder sweaters top down, this isn't a construction I see too often, since it doesn't save as much as it does with some of the other sweater designs. More on that later. The only big advantage it gives is the same one all top-down sweater designs have, the ability to try it on for length and adjust before the sweater is actually finished. The advantage of the drop shoulder sweater construction is that it's one of the easiest designs to work, both from the knitter's perspective and from the designer's. From the knitter's perspective, there's basically no shaping. There will often be some basic increases or decreases for the sleeve, like I mentioned earlier, but those are usually basic increases like knit two together or the SSK stitch. There's no need for short rows or wrong-sided shaping, which makes the drop shoulder sign less complex. And it makes the designer's job easy too, since there's no shaping, so there's no need to do any complex math with your stitch repeats on the body of the sweater. And since usually the shaping for the sleeves happens at the underarm seam, and it lets the designer hide any increases or decreases there without too much trouble. The disadvantage of the drop shoulder design is that it's not fitted to the body at all. With the shoulders being the same width as the bust or chest, it means you have lots of extra bulky fabric hanging around the underarms. It's suited to oversized fits, and I definitely wouldn't try any fitted styling with it. Also, the shoulder seam, where the sleeves join the body, sits far out from where the actual shoulders on most humans end, so it's unfortunately easy to end up with a sweater that looks like a tent, since it just flops off the shoulder with no supports. For some looks, this is great, but for others, not so much. So what do we do with those disadvantages? Well, that's where the modified drop shoulder sweater comes into play. By taking out a few stitches at the underarm seam, usually by casting off, it reduces the extra fabric there for a slightly better fit. This makes the modified drop shoulder sweater a bit less oversized in its silhouette. This keeps most of the advantages of the drop shoulder sweater in terms of ease of construction, while eliminating its biggest problem. Yes, the designer has to figure out what to do with the underarm stitches that are cast off, but since they're right at the underarm, it's easier to account for the changes in stitch count than it is, say, for a series of continuing increases or decreases like a raglan or a set-in sleeve sweater. More on those next. Honestly, for a beginner knitting their first sweater, I'd absolutely recommend the drop shoulder sweater over most other designs, so long as that person is comfortable with a bit of seaming. But what if you're not comfortable with seaming? Well, then a raglan sweater might be for you. A raglan sweater is called this because it uses what is called a raglan seam for the sleeves, shoulders, and neckline. According to Wikipedia, a raglan sleeve is a sleeve that extends in one piece fully to the collar, leaving a diagonal seam from underarm to collarbone. The advantage is a more tailored fit at the shoulders and neckline, as well as a distinct seam pattern. Even on a raglan sweater knit in the round, the increases or decreases are often spaced to mimic the look of that stitch pattern, and the stitch patterns will usually follow. Raglans can be knit bottom up or top down, and they can be knit flat and seamed or knit in the round. This makes a raglan sweater one of the most versatile sweater constructions out there. When starting from the top down, often the back neck is started first, with the neckline shaped using short rows then joined in the round. When working from the bottom up, there are a few different construction styles I've seen. The first is to start with the sleeves. Knit in the round to the start of the raglan decreases, with the stitches left live on a stitch holder or scrap yarn. Then the body of the sweater is knit in the round to the same point. The sleeves are added, and the remaining raglan increases continue in the round. The other method I've seen, though it seems to be an older method, is a seamed raglan sweater, where each piece is knit flat and then seamed together, working a true joining seam at the diagonal lines of the raglan shaping. With raglan sweaters, they provide a better fit across the shoulders and chest, but they aren't always suitable for every body type. If you have wide shoulders, for example, this style may not suit you. Or conversely, if you have narrow shoulders, like me, this style may require adjustments to the neckline measurement. Many raglan sweaters end up with too wide a neckline on me, because the measurements and siding are based primarily on the bust or chest measurement, and for me, what fits at the bust ends up being too wide at the neck. For the knitter, raglan sweaters eliminate most or all seaming, and the raglan increases or decreases are rarely difficult. Some patterns, however, will merely give the stitch pattern and leave it up to the knitter as to how to incorporate the increases or decreases into the stitch pattern, and not all knitters are comfortable with that. Take a look at the pattern instruction, preferably before you purchase if you can, to know if the designer has fully worked out the stitch pattern, including the increases or decreases, or if they're expecting the knitter to do so. If it is a pattern where the knitter is required to work the decreases or increases in pattern, I promise it's not hard, and most designers will likely include some sort of note at least on how to do so. And if they haven't, here's a 30-second primer. Look at the stitch pattern you're given. Work it until you don't have enough stitches to do it again. Then work the stitch pattern as far as you can. If it's a lace pattern, make sure that each yarn over has a corresponding decrease so that your stitch count stays the same. The decrease row for the raglan, work the stitch pattern you've been given until you have only enough stitches for your decreased stitch plus 1. So if the raglan instructions are telling you to do a knit 2 together, you'd work until you have 3 stitches remaining, 2 for the knit together and 1 for the last stitch of the actual round or row. And the reverse holds true when you're starting a raglan section. For an increase, you'll just add an extra stitch each time from the edge of your stitch pattern. For a decrease, you'll work the decrease as instructed, then work the rest of the stitch pattern, subtracting a stitch from the edge. I hope this makes sense, and if you want more help or instruction on this, drop your question in the comments, and I'll do the best to answer. To come back on topic, the big advantage of the raglan sweater is the relative ease of the shaping, plus the fact that it's a very easy sweater style to make seamless or near seamless. I've got a raglan sweater pattern in progress, and the only seaming is a teeny bit of seaming at the underarms. It's easy to make, the stitch patterns usually pair pretty nicely, and you can get some really cool styling with the raglan seams. The disadvantages of a raglan sweater is that it's a sweater design where your row gauge matters. If your row gauge doesn't match, your raglan yoke will be too long or too short, and it's challenging to adjust the sizes if you don't fit the body proportions the designer was working with. The other disadvantage of a raglan is the seaming. The shoulder seams of a sweater are actually structural. Knitting likes to stretch over time, and one of the ways to mitigate that is seams. Simplistically, knit stitches will stretch, but seams won't. What this means in practice is that a seamless shoulder and neckline construction for a sweater yoke, like many top-down raglan sweater patterns, don't actually have any seams for stability. This means The neckline is more likely to stretch over time. The next style of sweater can have a similar challenge when it comes to shaping and seaming, but before we get into it, I'd like to remind folks about why I created this podcast. I intend to talk about all sorts of knitting, crocheting, and crafting stuff so that you can create amazing things in whatever situation you're in. Remember, you can, in fact, knit that. And when I say knit that, I also mean crochet that or spin that. It applies to pretty much any craft I can think of. And for those things to talk about, I'll be relying on you, my listeners and audience. I want to hear what keeps you from knitting or crocheting, and I'll try and address the barriers you mentioned. It can be anything at all. I'll at least try and give you some advice. If you're having trouble with a particular technique, are wondering how to knit with limited or no time, or can't find tools that work for you, please reach out and I'll try and address your concern on the podcast. I'll even do pattern support, provided the pattern is free online and accessible to me, or one I can find at my local library. And, of course, I'm happy to answer questions about my own designs as well. You can submit your questions by email and have them read on the show, or you can submit an MP3 voice recording and I'll play it on the podcast. Now, back to sweater shaping. The next style of sweater, which is similar to the raglan but not identical, is the circular yoke sweater. This is the sweater type you're very likely to see for all this gorgeous Fair Isle yoke sweaters. Circular yoke sweaters are similar to a raglan in basic construction, with one crucial difference. Instead of the increases or decreases being all along a seam line, they're spread over the entire yoke. The crucial part of this means that it's almost impossible to knit a circular yoke sweater flat. Maybe someone could figure it out, but honestly, I don't know of a single circular yoke sweater that's knit flat. I mean, it's right in the name, circular yoke sweater. The biggest advantage here is that circular yoke sweaters are also almost always seamless, great for those who don't like seaming up sweaters like me. Also, you'll see a lot of circular yoke sweaters anywhere there's a complex stitch pattern along the yoke of the sweater. This is because, from a design perspective, you can put the decreases or increases wherever you need to work with a stitch pattern, rather than having to have them on the raglan edge and thusly interrupting the stitch pattern. It does take a bit of design work to make sure that the increases or decreases don't interfere too much, but speaking as a designer, you can usually find somewhere to sneak them in without too much trouble. The most common sweater type you see using this construction are the mini colorwork yoke sweaters. A good, free example of this construction is the commission sweater I knit last year. It's a free pattern based on a sweater worn by a character in the Alan Wake video game series. I'll put the link to the description so folks can download it and see how these sort of sweaters go together. The downside of the circular yoke sweaters is very similar to raglans. Like raglans, for circular yoke sweaters, your row gauge, or really your round gauge, my previous tech editor used to get on my case all the time about confusing the two, matters a lot more, because it dictates the length of the sweater yoke, and that dictates the fit for the shoulders and the upper bust. It also has the same problem about proportions that a raglan sweater has. If the neckline or shoulder width is too big or small for you, for example, they're more challenging to adjust to fit. Also, as I mentioned above, they do require knitting in the round. Well, many knitters have no struggles with knitting in the round. In fact, many seem to enjoy it as it requires no purling to do stocking stitch. If you're less confident knitting in the round and would rather knit flat, then circular yoke sweaters probably won't be your thing. Lastly, but far from the least, we're looking at set and sleeve sweaters. These are sweaters with a shaped sleeve cap and a shaped underarm. I was first introduced to set and sleeve sweaters knit flat, and that still seems to be more common than having them knit in the round. Also, because of the sleeve construction, they're almost always knit from the bottom up, with one exception that we'll get to, in the form of the contiguous set and sleeve sweaters. These are mostly knit in the round and start at the shoulder seams. Interweave Knits has a great overview of how these sweaters go together, and I've linked it up in the description too. They're knit using a provisional cast on, so you knit the sweater both ways from the shoulder. It sounds a little odd, but it works out well, I promise. Basically, a set and sleeve sweater uses curved sleeve cap and shaping at the shoulder seam to create two curves that come together. The upsides of set and sleeve sweaters is that they have the best shoulder fit, at least in my opinion. They're the most tailored to the shoulder, and they're great for a wide variety of looks. The downside is that they're fiddly. If you're seaming them, you have to be very careful about easing the sleeve cap into the underarm, or you can end up with puckering at your seams. They're also fiddly from a design perspective, since the slope, that is, the rate of increase or decrease, isn't even. So you've got some sections with more shaping than other sections, and honestly, it's very easy to mess up, both in terms of the knitting, but also in terms of the designing when it comes to things like stitch repeats. So which one would I recommend? It depends on a few things. For beginners, I'd usually recommend a bottom-up modified drop shoulder sweater. It teaches a bunch of skills, but is usually the least intimidating in terms of techniques required for construction. If you knit the body and sleeves in the round, there's only minimal seaming, as many people aren't fond of seaming. It's still a useful tool to have in your knitting toolbox. Or, if you want to lessen your seaming further, you can pick your sleeves up from the armholes and knit them working away from the body. For someone who wants a gorgeous all-over stitch pattern, I'd recommend a circular yoke sweater. It can be bottom-up or top-down. Your choice, but the circular yoke sweater plays the best when it comes to stitch patterns. For someone who hates seaming and wants an easy top-down pattern, I'd suggest looking at a top-down raglan. Just be sure to check the shoulder width, underarm drop, and the length of the raglan yoke to make sure that it will fit you properly over the shoulder and bust. But remember that another advantage of the top-down sweater is that you can try it on as you go. So if it doesn't fit, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly. For someone who wants a smooth, tailored fit at the shoulders, I'd recommend a set-in sleeve sweater, with one caveat. Check the schematic. Every sweater pattern should have a schematic or sizing chart for all the sizes. If your pattern doesn't have that, run. And see what the neckline width and depth is, as well as the underarm depth, and if you can find it, the shoulder drop. That's the distance that the shoulders drop from the neckline to the top of the sleeve. Compare these measurements to the measurements of a sweater you like the fit of. This will help make sure you don't have too wide shoulders or a droopy neckline. Honestly, that's the best advice I can give for sizing in general. Find a sweater pattern you love the fit of, and then use it as a comparison when looking at other patterns. And on that last note of hopefully helpful advice, I think now's a good time to wrap up this podcast episode. A huge thanks to my patrons who've supported the podcast. You folks can submit an MP3 audio or MP4 video file of your questions for the podcast over on Patreon. The podcast archive is available at my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/sarahdawn'sdesigns, and future episodes will be available here on YouTube as well. My goal is to get the podcast out to patrons on the second Wednesday of every other month, and the podcast available to the public a week after that, so I'm aiming for the third Wednesday of every other month. Well, that's it for episode 19. Follow or subscribe to be notified for the next episode, and thank you once again for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and remember, you can, in fact, knit that. Happy crafting!